Hi, Taurus. How are you? So, you know how sometimes, it's like, oh, well, I can't do this because, of this other thing, right? Like, you base a lot of your life around other people, right? Being ruled by Venus. You're like, well, I turned my whole life upside down. If everybody else did this, I'd do that too. You know, there's a part of you that's like really tribe oriented. You know, you're like, okay, I'm willing to compromise. You know, like I'm here, but I'll leave here to do that if you do this. So I suppose there's still some point of reference of the self within that. But I guess when you make your own plans, that's a different story, right? I guess since we're all connected, how do I explain this? There's something about going back or thinking about, which I suppose is going back to, right? It's not physical. It could be for some of you, but it's going back to these places that where you've been. Where have you been? You're an earth sign, so let's say physically. Where are the places that you have traveled to? Right? Sagittarius is one of your lessons, so this is travel. So where have you traveled? Say physically. And I heard, who drives the express bus to your stress? Who drives that bus? You drive that bus? Probably. I bet the devil's shifting gears though, right? The darkness shifting those gears sometimes. So we're sitting in the sun, if you're blind. I've always had an affinity for blindness. Something about it. The eyes are ruled by the sun and the moon, right? Oh, Scorpio's reading will be helpful for you. It's your opposite sign. They record it at night and you're during the day. I also was reminded, sitting where I am, being able to see what I can see now, is, do you remember the reading when you and Scorpio actually were the two that had a fire out here, and yours was really dark? Do you remember? And then all of a sudden it was just like, oh, we need more light. We used our voice to create, and then all of a sudden it was just all this light, you know, all this warmth, not just light but also warmth. I mean, it's a kind of fire that needs to be kind of constantly or more consistently than not tended to, right? because we weren't trying to do something huge like this enormous wasteful fire, right? I never understood why people do those big, huge, you know, like big, huge fires. I never got it. I think it's wasteful, you know. It's a waste of energy. It's a waste of resources to you know, you're not cooking an elephant, you know, you don't need that. So what are we talking about? That was just like Shiva and Ganesha, something like that. So Wire, don't believe everything that you read, Taurus. Oh, I see. Let's look at your first card. Six of Cups. So this is past energy, right? It's good feelings. It's reminiscing on the positive. You know, it's actually interesting too. I was going to do something yesterday, and so I pulled out some pieces because I was like, okay, I need these pieces to make this happen, right? And I gathered them. I was like, okay, here. But I wasn't quite sure of the timing exactly. And everything was set in place, and then a few other things happened. You know how plans go sometimes. You're like, oh, it's going to be this, this, that, and then when you're, you know, as soon as you actually, like, I saw someone like start a lawnmower or start a chainsaw or something. It's like once it's like, you know, sometimes you get to a knot in the tree, right? Or you hit something hit the rock with the lawnmower. But the point is that I realized some things happened in between, and then I was like, okay, this isn't what I was planning on. Wasn't actually just the time. It's not like it isn't going to happen. It's just like not in that very moment, not even on that day. And that was okay because, well, I guess everything happens for a reason. We got to trust that sometimes. But also, on the same token, being conscientious of our doings and our not doings, right? Kind of why. But what's interesting is that this card actually flew today. I came outside and sat in the sun when I woke up, even though really what I wanted to do was sit in the shade, but because I've been feeling very moon-like. I always feel moon-like in Pisces time, but either way, I sat in the sun, and then I usually go the same path. You know what I mean? Like I always we all work these paths, right? These Leo talked about these roads or whatever of ourselves. So anyway, I decided to go the other way. I mean, I'm going to end up at the same spot, but I decided to take a different way. I actually went towards the light. And when I did, I came around and actually Kit Kat, animal medicine seems to be strong for everybody. I guess the spirit of Azumi is also around strong, teaching us. Let's see. Yeah. But there's something wrong with Kit Kat right now. Like, she's making sounds. You know, she's kind of like, you know, when you can tell when you're close to something where you're like, oh, you don't feel good, or something's different, right? It isn't, because when everything's going good, we really don't pay attention. We just flow with it or whatever. But when something's off, it's actually really, really, really obvious. You know what I mean? That car sounds different, or the person or the animal or whatever, the wind. It's like we can feel it, and then it's like what we do with it. But anyway, I run around and I pet Cat but I know whatever she's going through, in ways of, you know, wherever she's hurt, she'll heal, you know, because she's a wild animal, and so I know she can do it. She just needs to rest and have a safe place to do it. But when I looked down, this card was actually on the ground. And if I wouldn't have decided to take that different path, if I wouldn't have decided to, or rather, if I would have decided to take the same road that I always take, you know, this, that keeps me in the shade, then I wouldn't have found this. Do you know what I mean? So maybe some of you taking a new path, or what have you, even it could even be going to a place that you know, again, going back to a place that you know, but you take a different path there. I don't know if you want to tell yourself a different story, or if this is literal for some of you, but you may actually meet a new person, or you may come to understand something deeper about how you interact with the world, or what you're wanting to interact with in this life. And I don't know if we mentioned it, but, you know, maybe it's just, you know, this kind of reminds me, I guess we'll tell a little story. This reminds me of when I used to live in New Mexico. I went there when I was 21. And I stayed there for a couple years, and it was beautiful, and it was challenging. Overall, really intense, deep experience. So many layers to it. And then I left. And I left on hard circumstances. That separation was a hard circumstance. But I left on my own accord, which felt good. And actually, Jesus, a man literally named Jesus that looked like Jesus, gave me and my friend and my dog at the time, Opie, that looked exactly like Zumi, a ride to the highway so we could hitchhike out. Jesus gave me a ride. So Zeus, you know, Jupiter gave me a ride. What a blessing. What was the point here? Oh, I don't know how many years later was that? 10, like 15 years later or something like that. 13 years later, I decided wasn't planning on it, but I ended up going back there to create a new experience, because there were parts of it where I knew that experience, even though it was so beautiful, there was a lot of pain associated with it, right? So I was just like, all right, well, let me stop here, you know, let me take a little rest here and go to this place and rest for a minute and see. And you know, because I was conscious, I was like, I want to create a new experience from this previous knowing, right? And again, it was beautiful and lots of learning then. I actually learned quite a few new skills. And it was also really intense and super raw. And that's actually when I met Zumi. When Zumi found me, really, is what happened. Maybe it's kind of we found each other. But either way, I guess there's a lot of good that can come from going to places you've already been with new eyes, with a new want to understand it. This could be, again, physical. It could be just in your memory. It could be we're in Pisces time. It could be your what you believe in your heart, you know. So let's see your next card. Strength. So we have Leo energy. This card particularly, the imagery to me suggests where there's a great, actually all of these cards suggest a really beautiful, real. This is real. This is not fantasy. This is not a projected fantasy or a projected reality. This is a real reality because it's internal. It's not external. It's internal. I mean, it's reflected in the external. Sometimes it has been. It probably is in some way. But like, this is an internal, emotional heart space. That's what makes it real. I see the teacher within. This is all these cards represent a purity in heart. They all represent love deeply, understanding. You know, it's understanding, like, because this card is giving. One person is giving, one person is receiving. The next card is where each person is giving and receiving at the exact same time. It's perfect, pretty much. But prior to that, there's a need to understand what it means to, like, what someone gives and how to give and how to receive. Then in the middle, again, there's this perfect fitting piece. Right? These pieces fit so perfectly together. And there's a lot of purity in that. It's like the beginning of love. Do you know what I mean? Where it's like, oh my God, this is perfect. Before the reality comes in. Because there's always challenges with things as we go along, right? It never stays perfect. Fixed signs have to learn that, you know, and we all have it. I'm not judging you. I'm saying, like, Leo talked about this once. It's like we have to have new contracts as we go along in our friendships, with the contracts we've connected to or made with the past. Do you know what I mean? It's just 17 minutes even. Thank you. With who we are now, with where we're going, with what we want to create, with what we're creating with. Then when we get into strength, again, this is another card of giving and receiving, and it's equal, but it's something deeper. You know, it's not, because Two of Cups is beautiful and perfect, yes, but it is a bit surface. It has fantasy. It has a little fantasy around it, right? It's the, oh my God. You know, it's this elated energy. But again, we live in this world, so sometimes we have to come back down into this, the reality of, okay, well, some things are stronger than us in certain ways. We all have ingrained weaknesses in us, right? We all have ingrained strengths in us. And recognizing what those are and seeing where we can reinforce and nurture and love the weak parts, right? Because sometimes our weakness is our biggest weakness can be our biggest strength, and vice versa. So it's figuring out how to work with these. Let's see the next one. High Priestess. Well, apparently there's something being known now, and you have to trust yourself with relationships, okay? You know how you trust people too easily? All Venus, you and Libra, Venus ruled people, a bit of naivete. Again, no judgment. We all got it. It's where we have to look beyond the surface. And I guess in all relationships, there is light and shadow, right? In all connection, there is light and shadow. Who inspires you, Taurus? What inspires you? You know, High Priestess is she's a quiet card. I always feel like she's very personal when she shows up. I mean, she holds secrets, you know, she holds history within her. She holds great knowledge within her. But it isn't always knowledge that's meant to be shared with others. Sometimes it's just the knowing within the self, you know. Let's see your next two. Alright, no, it's just one at a time. Okay, Five of Pentacles. This was actually in your yearly reading, remember? It talked about how there are those times where sometimes it's either consciously or unconsciously you put yourself in these places where you're feeling of aloneness or despair or insecurity, meaning non-security. It's so big, you want someone to save you, you want someone to comfort you, you want someone to guide you, right? Now, I suppose those of you who are like Sun, Moon, Rising, Taurus, you have this. The personal stars of Taurus are going to always have this because you're domesticated. So there's going to be this human that's always like, no, Bull, we go this way. Okay, Bull, no, we're going this way. No, we're taking a turn. Oh, we're coming back the way we were. We got to till the field. But if you're watching this from Taurus, from another space that's not personal for you, this is one of those things, and I guess this is a part of you where sometimes you got to realize like that you have to guide yourself, or you have to find and understand what the guides are that are within you, I guess, that are kind of invisible. Because you know what? We talked about this on the yearly reading. You, Pisces, Libra, Cancer, even a little bit of Capricorn, this more shy energy is actually meant to sort of guide this year because it's the year of the rabbit, which is a gentle energy. It's a moon energy. And so you actually are meant to step up into this leadership position, but I know it's uncomfortable for you because even when you have like reasonable confidence, there's always something about you that you don't like yourself, right? Scorpio, the opposite of you. Sometimes you hate yourself. I mean, you may never admit it, especially with personal signs. Like, it's an interesting thing. So, for some of you, you actually need to be of service to other people. For others of you, you need what do you need? Nine of Wands. Well, that's a spiritual, like, test. So, okay, you know how some of you don't like your birthday, right? It's always a weird time or something. It's probably the way you spend time, especially Taurus Sun, Taurus Moon. It's like the way you spend your time in Pisces time in March is completely indicative to how your solar time, when it comes in, happens, right? I guess this is anybody. It doesn't matter. The Taurus energy, it's like you have to give yourself time to find the positive in something, but also to acknowledge where it is, for instance, that you delude yourself, trick yourself, tell yourself that, I don't know, because Taurus is just as dark as Scorpio to me. It doesn't show, but there's this moon-sun opposition that always happens. You know, whatever your sun sign is, the opposite sign is, to me, is like this unconscious moon sign. So it's something to be aware of, and that's hard, you know, because if the sun is opposing the moon, it means you're born on a full moon, and when you're born on a full moon, when that's happening in the sky, you know, there's certain times where you're like, okay, I have energy, I'm gonna do this. And when you don't have energy, you have to rest. Because if you try to just, because this is giving, giving, giving. And then all of a sudden, what happens? High Priestess shows up that's like, you better chill. And then Five of Pentacles is like, oh my God, I have no energy left. My body actually, some of you can actually make yourself physically ill sometimes when you work too hard. Okay? And if it isn't physical, if it doesn't literally show up like that, although it would if you paid attention enough to your body, something aches or is sore. This can also be psychological, mental anguish. You know, that kind of unhealthy. And then what happens is all your energy is just depleted, and you feel like, well, what was the point that I just gave all that? You know what I mean? So, hold on. It's a bit of a slippery slope. Scorpio, Leo. Okay. And there's Three of Swords and the Hanged Man in this time. I actually burnt this card on that full moon, the beginning of the year. So, let's give a life lesson. Please never ignore your pain, okay? Don't disregard it. Please acknowledge it. Please be honest about it. Don't be poetic about it. Be real. You know, there's nothing, it's not like poetry isn't real, but poetry is always trying to it's trying to be honest without being honest. It's like a comedian, you know, when they say something and everyone's like, ha 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 ha, like it's a joke, but it's not a joke, it's real. And poetry to me is the same way. Sometimes we just have to be really, really, really real and honest, whether that is, you know, about whatever the depths is of it, the highs or the lows of that, okay? High Priestess sometimes can relate to dreams. You need to trust yourself about, again, your relationships. I would look at the positive and the negative of the past. I know this is a lot sometimes, but I suppose this is the way to find peace in your soul, in your heart and soul and mind, right? The Trinity about it. And, you know, because we've all had to let go and grieve. You know, we're all old enough now where we've lost things. Lost, it's a weird word. Things have gone away. You know, people have died. Marriages have crumbled. You know, careers changed. Like, psychological places altered. You know, it's learning the mind. And the mind is very complicated. You know, Gemini's your neighbor, so it's hard. It's a blind spot to you. You know, what's in your head and what's... actually, it's all what's in your head. And how you communicate who it is that you are. Your communication tactics. So... I guess this is the last thing we close on. Not everyone's your friend, Taurus. You have to remember that. You have enemies like anybody else. If you want to know who they are, look at your 7th house. Those are your enemies. If you happen to have Sun Taurus, if you're like a Gemini rising, you're your own worst enemy. And actually secretly so. Your 12th house is your secret enemies. Your 7th house is your known enemies. So something to be aware of. Do you know what I mean? Fifth house is also, I find, like a challenge house because it comes right before the battlefield and then right before dusk. So because you know what, if you don't acknowledge your pain, if you don't talk about it straight, this includes your anger, okay? Everybody has it. That's true. At yourself, at other people. I mean, really, I realized my mom and I were talking about the other day, when we're mad at somebody, when we get mad at somebody, although sometimes that needs to happen, to let out what it is that we hide in ourselves, you know? But really, all we're mad at, the essence of it is just that we're just mad. The anger is really just only hurting ourselves, the hidden emotions, okay? So, Taurus, let's close this out. Wheel in the sky keeps on turning. I don't know where I'll be tomorrow. Oh, the wheel in the sky keeps on turning. If you're hanging on too tight to anything where you don't want to let go, it's gonna explode out anyway. Up out of you, like I saw like a volcano. It could be literal, physical for some of you in your lives if you're in anything toxic. We're talking to a lot of people here, so please take an empowered stance to embracing what the conscious changes are. Realize who is your friend, who is not. What parts of you are friendly, meaning like where you're mean to yourself, okay? And I would also, in a practical sense, I would save your money, like be conscientious of your resources and understand what source is, I guess, to you. You know, because sometimes, like Scorpio said, sometimes the light is so bright and it's right there in front of us, but we can't quite feel it. Okay? So please have faith in the talents that God gave you, in the family that bore you, in the family you have created. And please be honest about the darker aspects of things. If you don't acknowledge them, Taurus, they will never, ever, ever, ever go away. And in essence, you'll just end up like diminishing yourself or distracting yourself with something. I mean, you can do whatever you want to do. But if you don't give yourself time to cry, if you don't give yourself time to release that heavy, well, because you know what, we'll close like this. From a person who's not a Taurus sun, moon, whatever, and very scorpionic. That's why it's intense sometimes in these readings, and I know, I'm sorry if it ever comes out sharp. It's just because I know how strong you are, and I know you can handle it, and I believe in you. I believe in you. I do. But the point is when you do let it out, when you're really real, really raw, super Scorpio about it, you know what happens? It only lasts a certain amount of time, and then eventually you come back, you bob back up. And then sometimes you sink back down, then you bob back up. So remember that in this process, okay? And in the moment, you may not, because it's scary, I know. But you know what the cool thing is about Taurus, especially in personal planets? You'll never kill yourself, literally. You'll never, you don't believe in that, you know? It's not, you won't go that far. Because you've probably done it before, being the opposite of Scorpio now. So, I heard be good, be creative, be thrifty, be open to the changes, right? This is one of your cards. The Empress is all about change and understanding the natural process of it, you know? Like this black walnut tree, it isn't blooming yet. It doesn't even have buds. Other trees are, but that one isn't. And I know that through my experience that this tree takes a little bit longer than the other ones to bloom. And it's good, because if everything bloomed all at once, we wouldn't be able to appreciate it. Do you know what I mean? Wouldn't really be able to see what it is. So again, in this Pisces time, please take a wider gander upon how you communicate, how you feel, and how you're using your talents in this physical world, how you're using your money, what your plans are for the future, and looking at your, again, strengths and weaknesses, okay? And that which you need strength, please ask for it. And remember sometimes that where you are weak, that is your biggest strength, but you have to acknowledge it for it to become a strength, to realize how to use it differently. Do you know what I mean? Because otherwise, it's just confusing to you. And this is where you surround yourself with enemies, whether it's physically or in your own head. Okay? Okay. Probably not a pretty angle. I ain't trying to be pretty for everybody right now. I'm just trying to be myself. I love you so much. I hope this was helpful. And in closing, any of you who are still here, you would be the ones. Any of your condolences or kindnesses and love, and Deb, thank you so much for that card. All your comments, all your, just, it was so beautiful. And I'm sorry I couldn't comment back. And if you wrote me emails, I only checked my emails like yesterday, and I hadn't logged into that world. I needed to be in my body. Do you know what I mean? I needed to be like in this real world a little bit more, and be conscientious of that and how I felt. So thank you for understanding. Thank you for your love. Thank you for your support through the process. It was needed. It was felt. I guess everything happens for a reason, so here we are. Please take care of yourself, and I'll talk to you next time.